Here, 1 second. Let that load up. All right, I think we're live. Good evening, everybody. We've got 6:33. We'll call the meeting for the Tiverton Recreation Commission virtually back to order. I think we have everybody on the commission with the exception of Ed and Rachel, and I'll monitor, and if Ed's able to show up, I'll just let him in when we get going. Also want to thank Brian James for joining us from the Open Space Committee. So, and we'll have a chance to connect with him in just a minute. So, first things first, the approval and corrections of the minutes from December 14th. Dana, can I turn it over to you?
Sure. Did everybody have a chance to read the minutes? Any questions, comments, updates, corrections?
I just want to say I found them really helpful when I was trying to remember what we voted on last time.
All right, so anybody want to make a motion to accept the December 14th minutes? Bob?
I'll make the motion.
Second from Dan?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Sounds like the ayes have it. Excellent. All right, next up, we've got partner working group reports. Ryan, how's life in open space?
Pretty well. We're going to be meeting tomorrow night virtually ourselves. So we pushed our meeting up a week in order to get items on the agenda for town council. One of which is the request to apply for the grant through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. And we've been pushing the engineers and tweaking the plans, and I think we're pretty close to having a final plan, and they've provided us with some budget estimates. Not a lot has changed, at least that would impact you. We're looking at, they've definitely added regrading that whole skating pond area to try and make that drain efficiently, get rid of the mosquitoes and maybe some of the Phragmites, and putting a trench drain under the road, but probably not elevating the road because it's pretty difficult there to get any kind of a pitch. And it's very expensive, obviously, to elevate the road. So I think the main question for recreation is the ticket booth, which they are carrying. And I think it would be in your best interest to have it be part of the, because they're going to do all the permitting for CRMC, to have it be part of that project. So that's what I wanted to check in on. The engineers just did an estimate. I can pull up the exact budget numbers, but they did a demo estimate, and I was speaking with Rick at DPW today, and he said demolition shouldn't be a problem as long as it happens before the fall when the landfill closes. And actual construction, they estimated at around 5,000, which I thought was kind of low.
Yeah.
For a wooden booth. And I did check in with Trish Hilton on the Grinnell's one. She said that was a prepackaged unit that they customized. And she's pretty sure it cost less than 10, all ready to go, delivered. And DPW did all the sonotubes and gravel and stuff underneath it. So there's a couple of numbers there. I don't know if you've gotten any other numbers since the last time we met.
I had a conversation, actually, Rick and I spent a fair amount of time today looking at prefabbed units, just sort of searching online to see what would work in like an 8x8 type space or an 8x10, with sort of the thinking being that if the location of the gatehouse is moving, there's also the opportunity to do something that could potentially have storage built into it a little bit more than exists right now, just for some
Yep.
small things. And also run power to it that would allow for the security system to be housed there, as well as the prefab units seem to all have HVAC sets up, or just at least an air conditioner unit built into it, which I think for some of the staff might be worth looking at. Always the question about how does that work with the cost of electricity over time, but what they were looking at is ballpark somewhere around 12,000 to 15,000 for one of those was the numbers that we were given. Now there's some flexibility in that. I know the ones we were looking at had a number of windows in them that we probably just wouldn't want by the nature of what it is, but that was a prefabbed, pretty much ready to go unit that Rick seemed to think was a decent suggestion as a starting point to look at. So we were going to revisit it a little bit more, but I would say if you're looking for a number out of us, I would say somewhere around 12,000 would probably be the number I would aim for, rather than the lower number. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts. That was just recent conversation. So
I think that's right on, Stu, because cost of lumber and all materials has definitely gone up huge. So anything you put in a budget now, I'd be smart and probably add, 10 or 15 or even 20% to it, especially if you're going for a grant, because again, costs are going up. We just did some roofing at our place and it went up 20% in 3 months. So just something to, be cautious of with the way the economy is and all that going on. That's my input.
thanks, Chris. So Brian, what do you need from us in terms of submission into the grant? Do you need something more formalized that would show the actual design of the shed? Is a number as a placeholder functional? I mean, how much do you need?
I think the number, 12,000 is fine for submitting the budget. Is that something that you have the ability to cover?
We're gonna have to try and figure out if we can ask for it in our budget. That's kind of where it's at. So no, at this particular time, no. Now, if Recreation, and I think this is a commission question, we're going to have to get rid of the gatehouse that was there. We're going to have to replace it with something else. The scope to which we do something probably will depend on whether it's part of the grant or not. I mean, I guess, what would there be any offset for any of the cost of it within the grant?
Well, the grant, I'm asking because the grant requires a 25% match. And out of that 25%, half of that can be in kind. The other half needs to be cash or other grant something. So right now, the estimates are just under 230,000. So that would leave us 57.5 for the 25%, half of that being raising it in cash. There's a couple of other possibilities that I know Save the Bay is looking into, some options to contribute cash to the deal, but I don't have that info yet. There's also a loan program through the infrastructure bank, and I called them today to ask them about that. And they're getting more info on that and getting that to me.
Well, something that we could, when is the award decision time? When would you get notified one way or another?
I believe that will be, so the deadline is what I'm focused on, which is February 11th, which is why I hope to bring it before town council on the 24th of January. And I believe awards will be in April, May.
So
I'd have to double check.
Well, the reason I'm asking is if the award timing falls within the existing budget cycle, based on where Recreation's current budget is, there may be some funds that we could look at allocating to that 25% of the shed. The challenge is going to be for us, the timing of when the beaches need to open relative to everything else. So I probably need to have a conversation with Chris Cotta on that a little bit.
Right.
So, because I mean, in our, it's the miscellaneous operating supplies. There's at the moment, let's see, balance remaining about $6,000. Now we do need to retain some of that for next year, but I also think this is a place we could look at potentially asking to allocate some of the funds to cover our portion of it.
Just checking to see when they if they gave a decision date. And then we also want to get, we want to start the approval process with CRMC quickly. And so anything, any type of permanent structure changes, whatever, would need to be part of that process. The estimated award date is sometime in March.
So there's enough time there. Well, so it sounds like essentially what we need to do on our end from REC is make sure that we have a pretty good idea of exactly what type of facility we'd be putting down there. And then I do think the $12,000 is probably a reasonable target number. And then identifying the parameters for that building so that it could be reviewed by CRMC as part of your submission. So I've got sort of my marching orders. I don't know if anybody else in the commission has any thoughts or wants to jump in as well too.
Location, I guess, is the other. I just wanted to confirm that. I know there was discussion about where that first road is, which is already cleared area, which is good. As
Yeah,
far as permitting goes.
I think that we were planning on putting it in that first turnaround, if I'm not mistaken, everybody. Is that accurate? Is that what folks remember? Okay. Good deal. Brian, do you mind if I join your meeting tomorrow night, just to sit in?
No, not at all. It's it's a public meeting. We're Zooming as well.
No, I figure it's always nice to ask, at least. Just lurk in the corner. But well, I appreciate the work you and Open Space are doing and pushing this forward, and including us as well. I really appreciate the ability to connect. So thank you. Anything else that we should be aware of?
Just that Chris and I met with Wenley Ferguson from Save the Bay to look at possible sand dune work this year, primarily just maybe tightening some of the openings a little bit or building up what's a little bit low. I think that was the gist of it. Chris, you still there?
I am here, yes. And those plans went over to the DPW. And I want to touch base because I think they're picking up Christmas trees right now. And then I'd take a walk down there with those guys and take a look at it. Hi, Bob.
We can hear you, Bob.
Yeah, but now I can't hear.
You don't get all, it's not all.
It's a give and
good,
take.
Bob. Yeah, exactly.
I'm screwed.
We thought it was going to be your lucky night that you weren't going to be able to hear him.
Yeah, he was asking, I was like, did you try turning the volume up? I don't know.
Might as well just sign off.
well, Brian, thank you. I will see you and your committee tomorrow night as well.
Okay.
And all good.
We start at 6, by the way.
I will make sure that I am there. I've got to check because I may have to jump to a library foundation meeting, but I think that's later. My meetings all blur. But, so quick town farm renovation committee meeting. We are moving forward. We submitted our most recent grant update to the state. And one of the things that came out of the last meeting that we had is we're actually going to try and take the parking lot on the south side over near the tennis courts and shuffle some of where the locations are so that the tennis courts and the pickleball courts, and I think this was actually your suggestion at one point, Chris, they're not all one giant court, but they're actually separated and staggered. And then try to look at rerouting the access road to the dump off to the side to create more parking and more centralized area. So it wouldn't stop us. It wouldn't stop people from going to and from the dump. We would end up gate a little bit. But the idea here is it would create a more centralized parking area that could be used for a lot of different things, and would still allow for the pickleball court and the tennis courts to be right next to the walkway where we'd originally intended. So
and that makes sense too when you think about what the direction of the dump is, that's closing pretty soon, right? So that access technically, would only be temporary, that we have actually a lot of people going through there, and then it's going to be closed and who knows what.
November.
Yeah. And so the thought, I guess, also was really, if you look at it, where was I going with this? If where the entrance is right now, there's a whole like wooded area off to the right, that whole area would be clear cut to be made for parking. So you'd have increased parking, you'd have a better flow for traffic. I think we wanted to look at putting some additional netting behind home plate over there for, I think it's Daniels Field, because Dave Paul was joking about the fact that Tiverton residents are always so kind and they give the parking spots to visitors directly behind home plate, which is really more about self-preservation for your windshield. So we'll want to fix that. But
that's been going on for years. When I was a kid, my mom's windshield was broken.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
We'd like to be more generous than that and see if we can stop that. But, we submitted the end of year report to the DEM. They said got it. We didn't hear anything else. But we're due to regroup with Chris and that committee sort of in a full scale. And the only other note I have is we currently have 2 openings, and we're specifically looking for somebody with grant writing experience or fundraising experience. And additionally, somebody with experience in trades. Would love to have those 2 positions filled. We had folks, other things came up and we appreciated their service and they had to resign. That is the Town Farm Committee. Dave Paul has sent me just a quick update for the dog park, which is, and I'll just read it verbatim. We are finalizing plans to get the fencing installed, gate system in place, walkway and signage, aiming to open early spring. No current needs. And he says land clearing and layout is complete. DPW and private vendors have been a huge help. Sconnet Landworks and Ray Johnson. So they've done some amazing stuff over there. It's cool to see it come together.
I'm sorry, for my notes, who was he wanted to thank Sconnet Landscaping? Is that what he said?
Sconnet Landworks.
Okay.
And Ray Johnson were the 2 names that he mentioned specifically.
Okay.
All right. That concludes partner working reports. We do not have any facility use requests. I will put one note out that I think probably next month, I'm going to encourage a lot of the folks looking for field use for next year to submit. They've already sort of worked together to formulate out for a number of them who would use what field and where. I think there will be a few other requests that are going to have to be sorted beyond that, but we do like to get those out of the way as best as possible through the spring relatively soon so that they can plan and we can plan and put together one calendar. So I know there were some, I think, school schedule issues that still had to be sorted out that might take some time, but positive direction. All right, treasurer's report. Rachel sends her regrets. She's doing good work for the community, helping to vaccinate people right now. But she submitted the treasurer's report, and the notes on the bottom of it read that our supplies and miscellaneous account has a low balance. We can transfer funds from other accounts that have the remaining balance without any projected expense through the end of June 2020. So the parks program is not going to happen for a while. Something that you noted last time, Bob, that was a good catch, that a lot of our beach personnel fees are lower because we didn't have as many lifeguards last year. So something we just, if it comes up as we go through the budgeting process, we'll note with folks. And we ran a shorter summer camp. So that's where some of the numbers are a little bit different than perhaps they'd be if they'd been full seasons, fully staffed. And the last pieces we used for the winter recreation account, there had been Secana River Outfitters had made a very generous donation, and we used a lot of the funds this year in particular. The benefit to that is we have a lot of things for next year. So we've got basically a full setup of supplies for next year. I did look at trying to go a step further and be proactive and take advantage of the Christmas tree shops and like all their sales, but it just didn't financially make sense at the time. I think we can still do probably just as well next year rather than me having to store all sorts of nutcrackers in my garage for a year, as lovely as they look.
Nutcrackers.
I did a quick test. We had a few weeks back, I had some people over and I had bought personally a couple of packs of those to see if the kids would play with them. And the kids did play with them. They colored them. They tried to make them look as angry as possible. So yeah, I don't know what that says about the kids. Okay. Anything else? Just any questions or comments on the budget? All right. I also did not have any requests for public comment, so we get to skip on that one. We're into general business. There's a couple of different pieces on here. Okay. So Bob had very kindly sent me some feedback on the fire pits. I did want to say I had a conversation with Jim Farrell over at Little Compton earlier this week, and just kind of asked, based on a few of the questions that Bob had raised about if you were to put out fire pits, what does the process work like? How do you dispose of the leftover elements? And so what he essentially said is that they're using the giant tire rings from trucks. He said that his junior lifeguards use essentially a gator to go put them out every day, and then they pick them up in the morning. So in terms of how Little Compton handles it, and I'm not saying we should do this one way or another, I'm just sharing feedback. He said that they are responsible for putting them out and taking them away. So I asked about how do they handle cleaning, and he said that the staff handles cleaning out the larger pieces, or some of the smaller stuff that's already the ash. He said in a lot of cases they'll rake it and either remove it, or if it's minor, they'll integrate it into the beach. So that was his comment on how it happens. I did have a subsequent conversation with Rick Rogers about this and said, look, if this was something where the recreation staff was responsible for sort of that same type of upkeep in Tiverton, and things were brought to a central location, would DPW be able to handle the disposal of that? And to his credit and with his usual tact, Rick sort of said, well, anything's possible. But he had some concerns about realistically, what would that look like, especially with a closure for the landfill. So I'm not looking for a vote on this tonight. I just wanted to relay some of the conversation that had come up based on the email that Bob had sent raising concerns. Figure I'll open it up to the group if anybody has any additional thoughts sort of at this particular time.
I read through the ordinance, and I thought the ordinance made a lot of sense. I think we were trying to separate as ordinance versus operation was really good, and I don't think I got that last time as much. So ordinance wise, I think you're all right, but I think the actual operation and logistics of moving the things in and out It's definitely going to be a cost to us, but it's also a really nice service for people, to be able to do that. So there's a cost to that for the town. But there's a benefit also, right? So I think that's a service we have to just factor in what the cost is going to be to run it and keep it cleanly. Definitely doable and not like $1 million project, not a super expensive project, but definitely something to just factor in and think about it over the next, couple months. Cause I think is something is a nice thing for the town. It is definitely good. It's definitely plus for recreation. As long as it doesn't, you don't have ash all over. One thing South Shore does have is they have a pretty strong tide and wave action. So if there are a little bit of ashes, they get swept away. We don't really get that big of too much wave action down in Fogland. So there might be a little more cleanliness. I think we also have a bigger beach area than they do, though. They don't have too much beach area. It really drops from a parking lot kind of right down. So, I mean, high tide, sometimes the waves are lapping almost up to your car tires. So just that's a little bit of a different setup. But as far as the ordinance goes, I think that's good. I don't know if you want to vote on that or what the situation. I know Bob had some concerns, but they're definitely more in operation.
Yeah, and I mean, we can do this in a couple of different ways. I think to your point, Chris, we can vote on the ordinance and then work out the details before we put it forward to the town council. We can, and this is totally up to the commission as a whole. We can work on sorting out the logistics behind it before we put it forward. I'm open to it either way. I do still think that there's a lot of promise. Bob,
was that Bob coughing again?
No, that was my dog.
Oh,
The joys of a virtual background, Aaron. So, Bob, what do you think on the fire pits? Can you hear us, Bob?
Yeah, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
You can hear
Yes.
me? I can hear you. I check here for all right. No, are you gonna be sorry you can hear me now? No. I just, thinking this over and stuff like that, I just want to make sure that DPW is on board with this because basically it's going to be fall back on them as far as like the heavy cleanup and stuff. I don't think we can put the burden on the gate staff, the kids, to go and, clean this stuff up, put it in their own personal vehicle to transport it someplace and stuff like that. So I just think that we need to do a little bit more research on this, make sure DPW is willing to help. We don't need to put any more burden on, any more strain on the staff that's there now because they do a fantastic job as far as I'm concerned. Maintaining what they got now.
Dana?
Maybe this would be an opportunity for a new position, like something a gate attendant or something like that. How he said he has, Jim was saying that he has the junior lifeguards do that. Maybe we could actually either use our gate attendants, just put more on the schedule and not to use their own vehicle or anything like that, but just at least maybe put it up closer to the road so DPW can pick it up or something like that. Utilize the people that we do have. We had a bunch of kids that weren't scheduled a lot of hours last year, and maybe this would be something that we could do to give them some hours.
Bob?
Stu?
Yes.
This could be another good point, another good reason for us to get some type of gator or utility golf cart. They could use that, the gate attendants or whatever could use that to go and pick up this, put it in the bed of the gator or utility bed in a golf cart to transport it somewhere where DPW can pick it up. This could just be another thing, another good reason to get a used gator or a golf cart with utility body on it.
Yeah, and that was actually, so when Rick and I talked about it earlier today, sort of the thought process was, and that is exactly what I guess Little Compton does too. So in the morning, the approach would be, let's say that we have a total of 5 fire pit rings, and they're all reserved for a day. So, you know, somebody would go out and they would make sure that all 5 of those rings are either in place or they're prepared, however we want to do it. And they would handle just doing the initial cleanup. And I did ask Melissa what her thoughts were with her staff on the idea of them taking on this responsibility. And she said she didn't think it was a bad idea. She said she was concerned, I think, which has been raised, about fire pits that aren't being attended at night, what happens during those other hours. But I didn't get into the conversation with her about the addition of the security system and some of the other ordinances that give more police presence. One other note that Jim did relay to me is he said, since they switched their hours to make it residents only after about like 4 o'clock, he said the number of problems they've had at Little Compton have dropped to almost none. So I don't,
Right.
again, just an interesting data point to hear from him. Chris, you look like you have a thought.
Right. I have a lot of thoughts. I think where you went with this last time, and that's important that everybody understands, is there's an ordinance and then there's the operation. And even though they're the same item, they are not necessarily having to be voted on or figured out at the same time. You have to pass one before you think about the other. And so that's, I guess, my point. If we want to vote on the ordinance part and then worry about the gator and all the other logistics later, whether we can pull it off this year or not. And they could be done at the same time, or they could be done separately.
Yeah.
I would say, to Chris's point, that's true, because we can pass the ordinance or put in for the ordinance to be passed, but we don't have to actually implement it until the whole town is on board and ready with it.
Right. You can't implement it unless we have a plan. So.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's separate from the ordinance.
But you also can't really discuss the plan unless the ordinance approves, because if the town council says no way, why make a plan?
So Bruce has kindly joined us, our lovely local fire chief. Bruce, you there? Sorry, I don't mean to catch you off guard if you are.
I am.
I don't know if you're monitoring this conversation, Chief, but I don't know if you have any thoughts.
As far as, we talked about the ordinance when you a couple months ago when you stopped by the office and stuff. I don't think my thoughts have really changed since then. Just listening to the conversation now about the cleanup and stuff, I totally agree with Bob, where, and this is just from my own personal opinion, obviously. You have to make sure that Rick and company are on board. You don't want to burden them with any more work if they don't, if they're completely opposed to it or whatever. It's certainly a good thought. One thing I was thinking about as you guys are having this conversation is, the rings are a certain size. There shouldn't be wood in there that's going outside of the ring, right? I mean, you shouldn't have 10-foot pieces of wood being burnt. So the cleanup, you would think wouldn't be that bad. If you had, say, the gate attendants somehow, I totally agree with whoever said it, we shouldn't expect the 18-year-old, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid to throw all this wood in the back of their own vehicle or whatever. But if there was a way to get if it was part of their job every morning to go make sure that the rings were still there, they were ready for the next day, and if there was any larger debris left in there, if they had like a metal trash can, they could put it in that trash can and bring it back up to the gate or the lifeguard shack, wherever they're going to bring it. And if there's not a lot maybe make a call to the highway department. Hey, there's quite a bit. Can you, have somebody swing down today? And if it's, if there was only 1 or 2 fires, or even all rings had fires in them the night before, but everything got burnt down and there wasn't really a lot of cleanup, then they wouldn't have to come down that particular day or something. Don't make it like every morning highway has to come down and pick up the debris that was left in the rings. And that's just something I was thinking while you guys were having this conversation this evening. But certainly like the gator thing, the gator idea, or the golf cart with the back or something, that would be perfect for the attendants to go down, run down the beach, checking the rings, the fire rings, every morning or whatever. Just a couple thoughts that I had while you guys were having that conversation.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I think it sounds like we've got a couple of common points that come up, and a lot of it comes back to the disposal of the wood or the transportation, getting it to and from, and making sure that we're not, it doesn't sound like it's as much of an issue of asking the staff to be involved, but I don't think I was ever intending for them to have to use their own personal cars to do it, but it is a really good point. So the kind of doubling down on that need for a gator or some type of transportation, and then also where to store it on the beach when not in use is important. So definitely something to look at. So I want to come back to Chris's comment about, do we want to take this in two parts and vote on the ordinance and then continue to move forward with it? Because even if we vote on the ordinance, we can either decide to put it forward to the town council, or we can hold on to it and say that we've approved it, and then work on the details. All by voting on the ordinance, what we're essentially saying is that the commission thinks there's enough merit in the idea to put it forward.
I think everybody just that's been on does think that it's a good idea, at least from what I hear. Details withstanding, right? So we still have to figure it out, and that doesn't mean it's a go. There's a lot of details, but at least it gives us, moves us that next step. We can keep that ideas coming forward, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. There may be some opposition to it that we're not aware of. I definitely think the cleanliness factor is going to be the key thing that people are going to be looking at. So we can figure out a way to do it, but it becomes a thing again for the town of Tiverton residents, like what Little Compton's doing. I really like that. I think a lot of people in town would like that. Something you can plan on for a Friday or Saturday night or midweek, so logistics of giving the rings out, getting them back. I don't think that's a deal breaker. And if we need to get the ordinance done first, then I don't know that it's we have to do it tonight, but certainly takes something out of the next meeting you don't have to worry about. We're already past one thing, and then you can worry about the rest, next step.
Okay, well, let's
We have that ordinance from last month, right? That you wrote.
It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so if we were to make a motion, would it just be to make a motion to send ordinance 4244 to town council?
Correct.
Is that good enough? Because I'll make that motion.
yeah, I think that's how it works. I don't think, however we word it, it's got to go to them either way. So,
Right.
If that's the motion, I'll second it.
all right. So we have, Dana, did you make that motion? And then
I did.
got a second from Dan. So
Yes.
is there any further discussion on this at this particular time before we vote?
Can you read that Can you read that ordinance again? Or is it on an email?
It's on like 4 emails. So it was included in like the last 3 agendas, section 42, 44. So I'll give a quick overview of it here when we're sitting. So it states that recreational fires are allowed on town beaches provided that the following guidelines are met. Permit must be obtained by the Recreation Commission to reserve a designated zone at the beach. The Recreation Commission, under the direction of the fire department, reserves the right to cancel reservations at any time. That's A. B, fires are only allowed at the beach from Memorial Day through Labor Day and from the hours of 3 p.m. until 10 p.m. Passes for evening burning must be collected from beach staff by 3 p.m. the day of the reservation.
Can I Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna say that the beaches are closed at 10 p.m., right? Everybody has to leave the beach by 10? Is that part of it? So do you think we should make the fires like till 9:30, give them a half hour to clean up? Because if we say the fires are gonna be out by 10 o'clock, they're gonna be off the beach at 10 o'clock. I don't see how that's gonna work.
Well, I mean, it's some responsibility on the person. If they have a permit and it's only till 10 and the beach closes at 10, then they should know that they have to start closing things down prior to 10 o'clock. I mean,
You're talking about people today that you have to put in the owner's manual of the vehicles not to drink battery acid.
I know, but I mean, we can't hold everybody's hand. Some of them I just want to smack their hands.
I hear that, Dana.
I mean, you got to be responsible for yourself. If you know you have to leave at 10, we shouldn't have to tell you that you can only have your fire till 9:30 because you got to be out of there by 10. I mean,
You know, you have this, you're gonna have the people's name with a permit. So there's that too, right? And I think if you have town people that are doing this and they want to do it again, again, this gets into the whole how you manage it afterwards, but you definitely like, it's not like random people on the beach with a fire. It's gonna be like you're number 3 out of 6.
Right.
John Doe, Jane Doe, we know who you are. You can't ever rent it again because you didn't do the rules or whatever.
When I talked to Jim Farrell, one of the things he said is that his police chief had told him that if there was ever a situation where it was left uncleaned, if somebody just walked away, to take photos of it and send it to the police department. And that if there were any issues that arose that resulted in some type of legal action, that having that was just enough. So we could set it for 9:30. You could set it for 9. I tend to agree with Dana. It's just, I don't know. I think when this gets kicked off, people are going to figure it out pretty quickly when, you see a cruiser go by at 9:15 or 9:30 and say, hey guys, Ed sticks his head out the window and says, just want to let you know you got a half an hour left to wrap it up, right? So,
and that's what they do at South Shore Beach. They come by and just give you a heads up. Beach is closed in a half hour. Get ready.
I mean, if you want to leave it at 10, but I just don't, people today sometimes,
no, they are. And I agree with you. They are. But I mean, if people are always holding everybody else's hand, then they're never going to learn.
So let me keep running through a couple of the other ones in here just so we all have clarity on what they say. C reads, fires are restricted to the fire ring or grill provided on site. The provided ring may not be moved. D states no fire will be started or maintained unless under constant supervision of a responsible adult. All fires must be fully extinguished prior to departure. E, the permit holder will be responsible for having access to a fire extinguisher or a bucket. F states fires must be kept at a reasonable and safe height and size at all times. Wood that is actively burning must not exceed 18 inches in height in order to prevent fuel rollout. G, fires must be fully extinguished before the permit holder and their party depart the beach. What else? H, and H is a really long one that essentially states the types of wood that can be used and can't use. So it talks about only clean wood may be used, no other wood or burning material may be burned. This actually was an area that Jim specifically mentioned. He said early on they had issues with pallets. And so this is where we get into the procedure side of it, is we can continue to outline on the application for this as well as on the sites what's included, or what's allowed and what's not, just so there's a reminder there. So that is the scope of the ordinance. Dana.
Just to Bob's point too, about the 10 o'clock, maybe not in the ordinance, but maybe in the rules and regulations of when you rent a fire ring, could be in there that is a reminder in that add to, like, but not in the ordinance, but like on the permit part, beaches close at 10, make sure you have your fires out prior to that, where it wouldn't need to be in the ordinance, but we would be giving them a heads up that they need to be aware that beach closes at 10. Would that be something you think would work, Bob?
That's fine. No. I just wanted to bring up the point where the beaches close at 10, fires have to be out by 10. Yeah, I just wanted to, bring up the point that we can try it and see. This is all new. It's all going to be, they might have to tweak it here and there. Let's try it. If we have problems, then we'll have to probably go back and say, okay, fires have to be out by 9:30. So this way here, give you time to clean up or whatever. Maybe try it. Just try it.
Well, and Bob, keep in mind that like when this ordinance goes to the town council, by law, we're going to have a public hearing and people are going to be able to comment on it. And I will say, I'll actually be very interested to see what feedback people bring up. We may have some folks that come up and share concerns or ideas or a different avenue for some of these things that may cause us to kind of take a step back and add to it. So just because we'd be voting on this now doesn't mean that it's immediately going into effect. It means, okay, we're at a point where we feel like it should go forward. We recognize we still want to work on the parameters for how it operates, but this is the guideline for the ordinance side of it. So I definitely hear your concerns. They make sense.
So could I ask one quick, or say something real quick?
Please, yeah.
So I totally agree with Dana. It's, people have to take responsibility, and unfortunately, I agree with Bob too, where, you got to tell people not to drink the battery acid. You know what I mean? So having something written on the permit might be a good idea. Also, we talked about at each site having a sign for each site with some of the rules and stuff. That might be a place to, fires must be completely out and pits cleaned by 10 o'clock for beach closing or something to that effect. That might be a good place to put that.
Yeah, I think signage is going to be huge with this, like everything else. I mean, we talked about for next year for the beaches, we've got to have better signage anyway. I know that's been on our radar collectively. So we're just more larger signage, I think, is probably the deal. We've got the posts up, which is good. Brian, you look like you had a comment.
Yeah, just two observations. When I was listening to you read through that again, I believe it begins by saying fires may be allowed on beaches, and then goes on and on. And I didn't know, I think the intent is only at Foglin. So I didn't know if you wanted to be specific about that. I realized the permitting process would.
Yeah, I think the intent was actually to leave that as town beaches rather than just Foglin, not because I have any expectation that we're going to go to Grinnell's anytime in the future, but if we don't offer. What's that?
I bring it up because there's also a beach down at High Hill that's part of the open space area. So.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we could, if we don't offer, it's kind of like when people request use of a facility, like we stopped offering the ability to use Grinnell's. So by default, it's not available.
Right.
But it doesn't explicitly say that in use. It's still part of our term. So yeah, I think we can still get where we want to go without changing it.
Okay, yeah, I just wouldn't want people being confused by that other beach down at High Hill, because it's all brush behind it, and obviously the houses down there are close together.
Didn't even know there was a beach there.
Oh, it's a beautiful beach. There's no parking. That's why you don't know there's a beach there. And the only other thing from my years of working at colleges was the statement that the fires need to be maintained at a reasonable and safe height, which I get, but that requires somebody defining that on the spot and getting into an argument with somebody about what's reasonable and safe. And my suggestion would just be to try and be a little more specific. Just say it has to stay within the ring and it can't exceed 2 feet or 3 feet, whatever's appropriate.
I would have to double check, but I think that language and that verbiage is actually in the ordinances already for people burning at home. I think it's the same language, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, we could get more detailed. I just don't know. With most of this, try to stay consistent. It does say wood that is actually burning must not exceed 18 inches in height in order to prevent fuel rollout.
I'm just thinking of somebody trying to enforce it.
Well, I can picture Bruce out there with like his tape measure standing next to the
Yeah.
fire.
You enforce it with a gallon of water dumped over the fire.
Yeah.
I agree, because the people that live behind me, which is still quite a bit away, they have huge fires. And sometimes it's a little like, holy camole.
Is it the house this time?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, are the woods on fire?
So do we want to make an adjustment to that line? Is there any request from the commission to change it?
I think we should leave it and let the town council deal with it.
Yeah. If you want to put flames not to exceed 2 feet, I think that's kind of safe.
Yeah, 2 feet within the ring.
2 feet. Yeah. The ring's a foot off. So 3 feet, you're talking sort of waist to chest high on most people. That's a good size flame. It starts getting over that.
What, hey, Chief, what do you consider safe height? Reasonable and safe height?
I'd like to say common sense goes a long way. Can we put that on the sign also?
No.
But going up to the top of the ring, and if that's what they're comfortable with, that's reasonable for them. If if it's somebody feels comfortable with having the flames licking up out of the ring, a foot or two, and they're comfortable with that, is it reasonable for them? Sure. If they have the water, a water can there or a bucket like we had talked about and all that stuff, I think that's reasonable too. So I think I would feel comfortable with trying. I mean, like somebody said before, it doesn't mean whatever goes into place can't be changed. If what everybody thinks is reasonable is 10 feet above the ring, then we got to do something about this, But I would be comfortable with that to start with.
That's fine, as long as I was only thinking of the people trying to enforce it, getting into an argument.
Oh, sure. Yeah, understood for sure.
What was your question?
I think by us telling them that they have to basically burn clean wood, get basically the wood from us. They're not going to be bringing 2x4s that are 8 foot high and making pyramids and stuff like that. We're going to be able to control basically the size of the pieces of wood that they're burning and stuff. So I think the language you have in there right now is pretty good. I know from my experience from camping for many, many, many years, if you buy firewood from the campgrounds, the flames stay within the rim. They stay a reasonable height. The problem you have is when people bring in pallets and bring in outside wood where they're burning framing material, 2x8s, 2x6s, 2x pallets. That's when you get the rip-roaring high fires. But if you burn firewood, clean firewood, pieces of pine, pieces of oak that are cut and chopped, I think the chances of having these rip-roaring 6-foot fires are going to be pretty slim.
That's definitely a good
Just
point.
speaking from my experiences from camping.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to add to that. I think that it sounds like the language is reasonable, and we keep that there, but really emphasize, make clear that the wood has to be sized to be within that ring. If that's there, and we have all the other language that's already set, then we should be fine. Going back to Chris's point, if we have also the language that we reserve the right to not rent these out to patrons, then we're looking at out of 6 or 7, we know number 3 was really out of compliance. It's pretty easy to hold people accountable and to manage that, since we're talking about a really small amount of fires, really.
And I think kind of to piggyback off both of what you're saying, there is the opportunity for us to look at down the road, potentially having a vendor on site to sell wood. It would be an attractive opportunity. But you actually have to go through a different ordinance about running a business on a town property. So whereas in a campground, they own all of the elements because they're, I would assume, a for-profit entity, or they're all inclusive if it's like a state park where they already have some arrangement. I think for us, exactly what Dan's saying, let's say it's in here, you can't use these particular things, we'll highlight that, and then we can evaluate how do we potentially bring in a vendor, because I think that's a slightly different conversation.
Good idea.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of sending this ordinance to the town council? Dan, I don't know where you went. Just keep yelling in the dark. Hey, disco ball? We'll wait till he gets back and then see if he wants to vote, but it does seem like it carries either way. Wonderful. Thank you, folks. I appreciate the work that was done on this, Bob. Dan, are you in favor of passing this ordinance? Or
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Yes.
So unanimous, and it passes along. So we will. I'll take it. I'll send it around to the other commission members who aren't here, and then we can determine when we want to send it up to the town council. If we want to just do that, do we want to do it right away, or do we want to wait for the next meeting, have a little bit more time to plan, and then send it up to them after that in February? That seemed to make sense.
I think we should do another round of planning and then send it to them in February, a little more fully baked, a couple more ideas.
All right. So I'll try to work on some of the details between now and February for another review on kind of guidelines and supporting documents. Go on. All right. Just a quick note, and it also comes with a question. Have we ever done spring break camps before?
No.
Would we be open to it?
Yes, we did try doing some spring break events. We had a magician once. We had a science event once, but they were like at the middle school. So, but we never really took it and did it the next year. So I think the answer is yes. I mean, doing anything we can do. Ideally, if we can have a quarterly kind of recreation event of some sort. We talked about the Easter egg thing a couple of years ago. I think it's cool. We know we got our trunk or treat and our Christmas tree. We need two other events. If we can get this sort of Tiverton days / recreation event, again, not sure what that is, and then something in the spring, whatever that is, April, it'd be kind of cool because you got four, things that we focus on as a team that, obviously bring attention to what we're doing, and it's a nice service for the town.
Yeah. I'm going to put something in the chat so folks can see it, and I'll talk about it as well. So we got a thing in the mail, I think I might have mentioned in a prior meeting, from a group called Minds in Motion out of New Jersey. And they essentially do STEM camps. And the way it works is that there's a per student fee to participate. You can charge on top of it whatever you want. And essentially we could do it if we were able to reserve either the gym or another facility like Sandy Woods, or maybe even, I don't know, the library. Some of this will all be dependent on COVID, but you could do STEM camps that have like robotics and other things during break. So I just had a couple of general questions because I haven't done it before. Is how do we, one, is there an interest in that kind of camp? Do we think there's merit in it and doing it potentially during like, I don't know, even like April vacation or something? You can aim for that time frame for the first one. But secondarily, what is the process for getting those out there? Because I know that we have to put something in front of the town council for summer camp, right? Approval?
Yes and no. It depends on what we're trying to do. If we're sticking to the same plans we've had for years, which is having these outside vendors doing it, it's one thing. If we decide to build our own camp again, that needs extra funding, and that's a budget question. But I think if you're hosting an event like this, I don't know that you still have to bring it in front of them, but I don't know to what extent.
Yeah, the way that this guy explained it to me, because I was asking about what the financial limit from the town is that there's no out-of-pocket expense to us, and there's no minimums for the numbers that he would run it. So if we put something out there and we find that we don't have enough people or interest, we can just cancel it and there's no repercussions to it. If we go forward with it, let's say we charge for the week, $175 or something. We'd have to take a look what the cost would be, but it wouldn't be as cheap as summer camp. But they could be all day camps. It could be 2 separate camps tied together if we wanted to do it. And the way he explains it is that he uses a teacher network that he has to teach how to do these kids.
That's cool.
It reminds me a little bit of like LC Makers, to be honest.
Right. That sounds like a cool idea. I mean, you probably get a lot of people who want to do something like that because spring break isn't. Not everybody goes to Disney World, right?
Yeah.
So it would be kind of like the vendors that we've used in the summer camps to do like baseball or lacrosse or whatever,
Yeah, we'd be running the camp technically, but we're essentially like outsourcing the hiring of the individuals and the management of it. And he does come insured and has no problem, getting the right paperwork to the town as well. So, I mean, I'm happy to explore it further. I don't know what mistakes I'm going to make, and I will. But if folks are okay with the idea of exploring it a little bit more, I'm happy to dive in and come up with a plan for the next meeting.
I think that's a great idea.
That sounds cool.
You're saying that would be a spring thing, something like over April?
Well, and we could do it as part of summer camp too. So we could use the spring break as a test. And if it works and there's an interest, we can roll it in and do the same thing in the summer as part of like our recreational camp lineup.
Right. Makes sense.
Okay. So am I getting the green light to just kind of maybe move forward right now?
Yeah.
Green.
All right.
Green means
I may see if I can reserve the gym at one of the schools just so we have it and we can always release it if we don't get the approval.
Sounds good.
All right. So the next 3 items on my list, summer camp, beaches, and events, we can talk about all together. We can break them down. Essentially, the way that we're now structured as a commission, you've got staff members, 1 staff member running beaches, 1 staff member running summer camp. And then we've talked a lot about the events that we want to do. And I think we need to get to the point where from a commission standpoint, there's 1 person handling maybe 2 each of the different areas. And we've talked about this a little bit more, but what I'm kind of hoping with this particular meeting is that if somebody wanted to step up and at the end of this particular meeting say, you know what, I'm going to start running with planning our summer camp. I'm going to start running with making sure that we have beach staff and lifeguards. Some of the things we've done in the past, I'm looking for people to help step up and take kind of point on each of these different areas. Very happy to help personally. I need more folks involved too, if we can do it. So, and there's a lot more history on this commission than I've got. So would welcome folks. And essentially, if you own it, next meeting, you're going to start giving the updates on where things are at and with timelines. So that's what my plea is for these 3 topics. Yeah.
What are the 3 topics? Summer camps, beach staff?
Summer camps, beaches, and events. And then so within summer camp, it's focusing on getting the hiring, looking at not only for the camp we run ourselves, but also other pieces like the STEM one we just talked about, and getting that going, and the reservation of the facilities for using it in the school as well and the other various locations. So everything that encompasses. I know you've done a lot of that before, Chris. For beaches, and I get a pretty strong read that Melissa's going to want to come back, but working with her, essentially starting now to begin looking at how we recruit lifeguards and starting to get people back into the fold and really setting us up for success for the beaches for 2022. That includes, as we get through this budget, potentially having the ability to use the stickers with a scanner on them and integrating that system into it. And again, I'm happy to help with the onboarding of that part. With Melissa having a year under her belt, that's I think a huge plus. And then the last one with events are really what you talked about, Chris, where you've got the tree lighting, you've got trunk or treat. looking at doing Tiverton days over the summer, and in swapping messages with Kelly Levesque early a couple of weeks ago, I think they're willing to help as sort of a subcommittee under Recreation. And I also saw Sally Black, who was totally on board for it too. So that part of it, and then looking at trying to do maybe a couple small things in the summer, like you could do a summer concert series on the beach, you know, those kind of things. So what I'm looking for is somebody to run with each of those areas: beaches, programs, and then events. I can take one of them if somebody doesn't want to, but I can't do all three.
Stu, I'll throw my hat in for the summer camps. I can help with that.
Perfect. Dan, do you want to find some time to do a debrief either later this week or over the weekend?
Yes. Yeah, please.
What's well, while we're on the topic, is there a particular time or date that looks good to you? And I can do a debrief with you.
How does Friday afternoon work for you?
Sure.
All right.
You want to just give me a shout when you're free Friday afternoon?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank
Works
you.
for me. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Stu, I would talk to Ed about the beaches. I mean, he spends a lot of time on the beaches anyways. He's always there patrolling and stuff. So maybe talk to Ed about taking over the beaches.
I'd love to talk to Ed about taking over the beaches. Yeah, I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him in 2 meetings at this point, but would love to. I think you're on point. Would folks be open to the idea of potentially volunteering Ed in absentia and seeing what he says?
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Ed. Excellent. This is why you don't miss meetings.
I'll teach you to miss a meeting.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic idea. You go, Ed.
Yep.
Hey, Chris, do you want to tag team events?
You know, I was just thinking the exact same thing.
Wow.
I
Perfect.
was going to ask you, but you asked me first.
Great minds think alike.
All right.
There
Perfect.
are
So
4
Dan-
events, so we need probably 4 of us with one leader.
Well, and I'll give you. I started a recreation calendar, and I'll send it over to you guys, and you can run with it. There's actually a couple of different calendars that I'll loop you all in on, and we have a website that we're gonna hopefully launch relatively soon. That's a repository of information. I got a green light from Chris Cotta to do that. So this is awesome. Dan, you may also get help from Rachel on summer camp. She's been really good in that space too. So I have a feeling she'll want to step up, and I'll help Ed if he doesn't want to take it all on. But I like volunteering and good things. So cool. You guys are awesome. So plan on at the next meeting, try to have a meeting offline between now and then to formulate a plan, and try to come to the next meeting with a guideline with deadlines for when we're going to start doing things. So when you look at, like, I'll use summer camp as the example, we know what the dates are going to be for it in theory, for the actual camp, and then trying to build around that and figuring out what kind of other offerings we might want to put in there too. With the events, we know when most of those are. We've started doing some really, I think this past year worked really, really well in getting a lot of the planning pieces together, and we'll roll with it. So very cool. And Bob, you can guard the chickens. Does that work? Right. Flamingos, if you will.
What happened?
Oh,
I said you can guard the flamingos. How's that?
Pink
Flamingo,
chickens.
The pink chickens.
There we go. Yes. The big chickens. So, all right. Well, this transitions us to the last item of the night. Bob, you wanted me to put on the agenda an item to discuss installation of a gate system at Foglin Beach. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. I think I just like to know if there's any interest in the commission on looking into putting a security gate at Foglin Beach. I think if we put a gate up there that would be remote controlled, some type of either key card or a code box like they have at campgrounds and stuff to get in. I think that would eliminate a lot of our problems down there. I know one of the, if not 2 of the residents down the point were interested in even paying for it or chipping in. So I'd just like to know if the commission would be interested in looking into this. It's something we want to pursue. Maybe we could form some type of subcommittee with a couple of the homeowners down at the point and see what the costs would be and see if it's feasible to put some type of security gate system up at Foglin. Something similar we have at Grinnell's. The only thing would have to be like a remote control somehow. I've been looking stuff up online. You're probably looking at somewhere for the remote control setup with the keypad and stuff like that, somewhere around $5,000. Not including the gate and stuff like that. But I don't want to dig too far into this. I don't want to do too much research on this if there's no interest in backing by the commission.
Yeah, I think the only reason you would put that down there for the few select weekends where there's a lot of people going down there. You're going to Fogland on an average day like today. There's a few people going in and out there, and to have to maintain that throughout the year. And I really don't think it's fair to the town of Tiverton, the people pay taxes here, to have to now not be able to use that beach. I mean, I think a lot of people live here for the open spaces and the places like that. That's one of those ones that to regulate that and say, you can only go in there at certain hours and worry about it and start gating it. I don't think it sends a really good signal. I do agree that there's issues certain weekends of the year, but they're really limited. You know, I live down here. I can tell there's a few afternoons when it gets busy, but you know, with the police patrols down there this year, Ed is 190% better than it was in 2019. 2020, obviously, it was COVID. The whole place was gated off with police tape. But 2021, those guys did such a good job last year. Josh and Ed were like the saints of the beach, watching out for it. Now, if that's not too costly, I think you maintain that another year. I just think it was so much more regulated this year, which is my opinion. And a gate just sends a weird message to the rest of town about it, you know, especially that there's houses on the other side. Because now you get, is this a gated community? And if you go drive down the South Dartmouth, you see what I mean? They got gates everywhere on every little road going everywhere. And it's, to me, it's offensive, you know, to the environment, you know. It's a place people come down, they walk their dogs, you know, all year round. And we just have to watch them those busy weekends. That's my opinion. I don't think it's a good idea.
You live down there. You see what goes on down there.
I trust. I can look out my window and see the beach.
Right.
You know?
I mean, I trust your opinion. You know, I respect your opinion. I trust your opinion and stuff like that. I mean, if you feel as though it's really not a good thing, then I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with that.
If last year with all the effort we put into it, you know, with the patrols didn't work out, you know, then you got a different situation. Then you got, you know, it's kind of anarchy. But, you know, the way we're doing the patrols and all of that, I don't think it's something we want to add a fence, you know, to the front of this thing, which is, again, really used by the entire town, you know, to maintenance issue. And it's just such a negative connotation. I'd say see how this year goes again with the patrols and then some of the upgrades we're doing around the area with the new beach house, you know, the new gatehouse and stuff like that. I think it'll be all right, you know.
Maybe with the security cameras when they're finally hooked up and working.
Yeah,
that'll help too.
That's what I'd say. Let's see how that goes, you know, and I think it's all right, you know. Keep in mind, you know, the nicer that beach gets, though, the more people want to go to it. You know, there is that. The nicer you make it, the more it's going to become popular, especially in this day and age of social media, people taking pictures and stuff.
Well,
I think you monitor it every year and see what it looks like.
The only reason why I even brought this up is because we've been kicking this around for the last couple of years. You know, even some of the residents on the end, they were talking about chipping in and buying. I just figured, you know, either we're going to do something with it or not. Like I say, you know, you live there, you see what's going on. I respect your
Yeah, I
You
think
know.
it's a last resort, if things get really bad, I think it's a last resort, but, like I say with the patrols, everything that went on last year, notwithstanding a little bit of vandalism, and those benches were being vandalized for, they went in, they were getting beat up. So that, I don't know that you can avoid that unless you make something that's like, stainless steel. But the beaches are looking better. I don't think it's I think you can keep it in the back burner. I don't think it's a bad idea if things go really negative. But right now, I think, with the sand dunes and the improvements to the beaches and the benches, I think we're doing all the right things. It's a beautiful beach.
Mhm. Yep.
Other thoughts?
It's fine with me.
I would echo my take on is I would echo what Chris says. I think you're going to get a lot of people that have significant pushback from in town if you put a gate up there, just purely based on the optics of it. Not saying it's not something to revisit in the future, but we're making a lot of changes that may address what your concerns are, Bob, and I know we all share those concerns. So I don't know that it's a non-starter, but I do feel like there's an opportunity for us to maybe look at how do we approach it in different ways, because having that gate is it's a pretty strong reminder of keep out, and I think we may not want to go down that road quite yet.
Right.
Just don't set things on fire unless you're supposed to in fire pits. Anyway. Bob, does that work for you for right now?
Hey, I told you, Michelle, you got my audio. I got one more thing I'd like to bring up. It's not on the agenda, but I was thinking about this. We have a piece of property that is under the Recreation's jurisdiction, or whatever you want to call it, that's in the north end of town, down off of Bay Street. It's a park over there that we don't really use or anything else like that.
Bayview?
Which, yeah, we do. It was an old school down there, the old Justice
Bayview.
Street School.
Bayview is what you're talking about.
Yeah, the old Bayview School. That's what it was, the old Bayview School. That's part of that falls under we don't do anything with that. I was thinking about, we can put this on the agenda for next month or whatever, but I was thinking about turning that into a small dog park for the people in the North End.
So I would disagree on turning that into a dog park until, first of all, we see what the foot traffic on the main dog park looks like, and if an additional one is required. I'll also say that when I met with a couple of representatives from a few of the leagues, just in an informal way to say like, hey, what are your needs? One of the things we looked at for East Bay field hockey was, because that field is like a 120 by 90, is letting them have that as a footprint, because it's essentially a game-sized field. And so there were questions that they raised about the drainage on it, but before we turn it into a dog park, I think we're running into a crunch because we have so many fields in town, or so many leagues in town, which is good. This is a way to actually, that may work. There is, however, another piece of property that we own that isn't big enough to be used for a field, and the name of it escapes me right at the moment. It's a much smaller one. I drove by it. We can bring it up in the future, but it may be a good fit for what you're looking for, Bob, because it can't be used as a field for any of the teams or the leagues.
Well, the only reason I said this is I've been by there a few times. And I see people with dogs actually walking in that area with the dogs and stuff like that. So, that's the only reason why I just brought that up. Just food for thought.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm all for more opportunities to have dog parks. I think I'd love to give the folks that are doing it now, yourself included, the opportunity to get that one done and drive it forward. But like, if we find that it's not working, then, let's talk to those same folks and see what they think. But
too bad we didn't have warm weather here all the time, because I'd say we can make it into a pink chicken park.
I'm on that particular note, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I've got a motion from Dana, second from Chris. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
guys.
You guys.